Welcome to the MasterMIND Club, your ultimate gateway into the world of Bitcoin mining. Whether you're just starting out or looking to scale your operations, our vibrant community of like-minded enthusiasts is here to support you every step of the way. Join us for weekly sessions led by industry pros, where you'll exchange ideas, brainstorm strategies, and stay motivated on your mining journey. From heat management to site optimization, our monthly deep dives cover the technical know-how you need to succeed. And with access to our entire back catalog, you'll never miss a beat. But that's not all. Our members enjoy exclusive one-on-one sessions with veteran miners, plus direct access to special pre-sales and insider opportunities at Bitcoin Mining World. Ready to take your mining to the next level? Join the MasterMIND Club today and secure your spot in the future of Bitcoin mining. Visit bitcoinminingworld.com or scan the QR code now. And now back to the show.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Friday's Mastermind Deep Dive session. Today, we're here with Kevin, and Kevin is going to be going over how to get funding and financing for your large-scale or medium-scale industrial Bitcoin mining operation. So we're excited about this. We're going to just rip right into it. Kevin, take it away.
Perfect. I appreciate you, Trevor. What's going on, everybody? Like Trevor mentioned, my name is Kevin. I'm essentially a funding strategist, if you will. Been in the industry now for give or take about 4 years. And it's been a journey from helping entrepreneurs from startup stage all the way up until professional, established businesses. Essentially, that's pretty much my forte. So we're going to be covering a lot of information today. So Trevor, if you don't mind, let's go ahead and get to the first slide. And
Absolutely.
we can go ahead and get started. So, like I said, I am a funding strategist, right? My company's programs include essentially whatever you would need across the board, from being a startup all the way to an established business of over 10 years, regardless of how much revenue you may be producing or how much revenue you are looking to produce, right? Some of our programs can include the SBA, which is essentially the Small Business Administration, our government's prime resource for funding newer businesses, established businesses, revenue businesses. We also include MCAs, which is merchant cash advances. So let's say, for example, if you had a business and maybe you didn't have the most stellar credit in the world, however, your business is producing revenue, then that would be an option that would be of service to you in that particular situation. The rest of our resources do also include invoice factoring, construction lending, private money, credit stacking, which is actually going to be the focus of what I dive into today, and then private equity coming soon next month. Personally have funded over 7 million to small businesses in 2024. Looking to bring that number up to 10 million by the end of 2024. So I got a bit of a challenge in front of me, but I think we can accomplish it. And I am also a private lending consultant, right? So whether you have an active business or not, I normally like to offer my services up to people, step in kind of like a third-party consultant, and basically make sure that I can navigate the minefield with you of acquiring capital for whatever needs or resources you might have for that particular industry. If we could hit the next slide, that'd be great. Perfect. So just to dive a little bit deeper on the topic of funding, what it inquires, and the range that it covers, essentially what we're doing here is consulting on capital acquisitions. There's countless reasons why you as a business owner or entrepreneur or investor has that need for capital, right? And servicing that correctly means everything. The reason why is because there are too many options in today's world. And there are too many times that I've seen an entrepreneur fall into the wrong program that doesn't necessarily provide them with enough leverage for their specific situation, right? Let's say, for example, if you were in the construction industry, right? Your need for capital is going to be completely different from somebody who is in the technology industry, right? We're dealing with two completely different products and services. And at the end of the day, my biggest thing when it comes to making sure that my clients and everybody can acquire capital is being able to buy enough time, right? So I'll be diving a little bit deeper into that, right? The ability to service upper echelon clientele is also something that attracted me into this industry. and something that provided more of a need for me to make sure that the consulting was on point, right? At the end of the day, guys, we treat our businesses and we treat our projects just, I would say, with just as much love as we do our own children, right? The main reason for that is because we built this, right? This is something that we have brought together for legacy reasons. This is something that we have brought together in order to feed ourselves and our family. Not only that, but especially being something that we have constructed in order for us to buy back our time, right? Everybody's time costs something, right? Regardless of what you do right now, your time is worth something. Being able to raise the value of how much a minute is worth or how much an hour is worth in the long run is how you can get to a point where you retire at, 50, 40, or even some people that are extremely rare retire at 30 years old because they understand the concept of what time is worth and how they can build it up to where they can buy it back, right? Brokering deals with multiple parties. I consider myself a little bit more of a networker in today's time because I work with so many different people in so many different industries, right? And on the subject of acquiring capital for that, it's no doubt that new resources, new connections, and new introductions are always a result of who I'm working with, which communities I decide to work with, like the Bitcoin community as well, as well as making sure that my reputation is always solidified, right? And then we also have higher level business networking, right? Now, when it comes to networking, I truly believe that you can use that to get into doors that degrees might not be able to get you into, right? I'm sure we've all heard at one point or another, you're only one connection away from, buying a year's worth of time or changing your life in less than a year. And I truly believe that that is the case because there are too many people out here that have information that maybe we do not yet have access to, right? And it's not necessarily to be looked as from a gatekeeping perspective. However, it benefits you to be able to shake hands. It benefits you to be able to get yourself into rooms that you don't normally find yourself in so that you can then acquire information that otherwise you would not have access to. If we can hit the next slide, that'd be great. Perfect. So I mentioned earlier that we would be diving a little bit deeper into what's known as credit stacking, right? So before I get into our general pre-qualifications here, credit stacking can essentially be looked at as traditional banks, regional banks, and or credit unions basically lending you their main tier products, which are going to be business credit cards, business lines of credit, and term loans, right? Anything above or anything in between that range right there is what most people would have available to you. And when I'm talking about banks, I am talking about some that you may already know, like Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, PNC, Truist Bank. Even the banks that aren't nationally available in every state, some of them are regional, some of them are local credit unions, right? So on that subject, some of the general pre-qualifications that I like to put together for a lot of my clients falls under their personal credit profile. And the reason for that is because when a bank is considering giving you lending, most of the time, what they're going to do is they're going to take a look at the owner's personal borrowing history. And a lot of times they base their decisions off of how well that owner has been able to construct the profile they already have and how much leverage they've been able to build just under their own name, right? So some of the things that they are looking at are, how well have you been able to keep up with your mortgage? Have you ever had any late payments on any revolving lines like a HELOC or a credit card? Have you been able to take care of, things along the lines of student loans or auto loans, right? So basically, whatever the best picture we can build when it comes to our personal credit profile, in the long run, it doesn't just benefit ourselves when we want to buy a car or when we want to get into our next mortgage, but it also benefits us in being able to give us leverage on a startup or even something along the lines of an established business, right? Now, why is that? We live in a credit-based world, right? We live in a world, especially here in the United States, where you have the ability to build up a profile that can speak for you. And believe it or not, you can actually separate that profile from the money that you make. And what do I mean by that exactly, right? Let's say, for example, I'm looking to apply for a business credit card, right? Let's say I decided to go for the Business Inc. Cash from Chase. It's a credit card that offers a 0% introductory period for 12 months, right? So for those 12 months, I'm not going to be paying any monthly interest or any monthly APR, which is a blessing in and of itself. And I'll cover a little bit more of that as we go through the presentation. But an application like that, for example, they require projected and stated income. Now, what exactly does that mean? Let's say, for example, I started a brand new business, right? My LLC is less than 30 days old, and I decided I wanted to apply for a business credit card. Is it possible to get an approval? Yes, it is. And let me tell you why. When you're going off of stated and projected income, what that technically means is the bank is not going to ask you for tax returns, and they're also not going to ask you for bank statements in order to support how much income you're making or how much revenue your business is projected to make. Why is that? Well, they can see bright as day, your business is only 30 days old. So what's the point in them asking you for your business tax returns for the last 2 years? It wouldn't make a lot of sense. But banks are in the business to make money off of lending money, right? They are also in the business of minimizing as many liabilities as possible. So within those two thin lines comes being able to get an approval for a brand new business, right? What did they do in order to factor in how they wanted to approve you? Well, they looked at two things in particular, right? The first one is going to be your personal credit profile, which we're about to dive into now. And the second one is going to be a properly constructed business entity, right? Making sure that your LLC is compliant, making sure that your corporation has the necessary credentials that it needs to in order to be presented to the banking underwriters, so on and so forth. So if we take a look at these general pre-qualifications, the first and most important thing that we're going to be looking at here is basically going to be a clean profile, right? Everybody's definition of what a clean profile is can be a little bit different. And I feel like for the most part, that's also because many people are using things like Credit Karma or things like your banking app to calculate what your FICO scores actually are, right? So no negative or derogatory items. That can include collections, any third-party charge-offs that you may have had from a creditor, looking to settle a debt with you. That can include late payments. Anytime that you've been more than 30 days late on an open line is thus classified as a late payment, and it'll show up on your account history on your credit profile as a 30-day late. Repossessions, right? We all know what a repossession is. Had an auto loan, didn't pay it off, they decided to come collect. Bankruptcies as well, right? So basically anything that can hinder the overall health of your credit profile is what we're going to want to have either repaired or removed, which thus is possible as well. We then have minimal recent hard inquiries. Anytime that you send in an application, anytime you send in an inquiry for new credit, whether it's a form of an auto loan, whether it's in the form of applying with the bank for a personal loan or a credit card, even when you're going for business funding, what the bank is going to do is they're going to check your credit profile. Oftentimes, I would say 9 out of 10, they're going to leave a hard inquiry. And that basically means that, for example, on May 5th, 2021, Chase Bank checked my credit profile. Or on October 3rd, 2023, PNC Bank checked my credit profile. They never leave what reasons they checked it for. They just know that they received an application and thus a credit check was performed. These do not necessarily hurt you as much as people may think, contrary to popular belief. However, when we have lenders assessing our profiles and when we have banks trying to figure out whether we are lendable or not, it does make the most sense to have as minimal recent hard inquiries as possible. More specifically, less than 3 within the last 6 months. The main reason for that is the more you tend to stack up on your credit profile and the more they see, it makes you look as if you've been actively seeking credit. And it's just generally not a good first impression that we want to give. Think about who you would actually let borrow your money, right? You're going to try to get as much background information as possible on the person who's asking you for money, even if it's something as little as $10. Chances are you would probably rather lend $10 to a colleague from high school than you would a homeless person outside of 7-Eleven. The reason why is because you know somebody better than you know the next person, right? You have some form of background context as far as who you would actually trust to lend that money to, expecting to get a return, regardless of whether you want interest on it or not. We then have the structure build out, or an optimized structure build out, which I like to call it, which is essentially at least 5 primaries minimum, not including any authorized users or trade lines. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into this third one specifically because I have seen confusion in the community and I've seen questions come about when it comes to what that profile build out should be, right? So there are a few different types of accounts that you can have on your credit profile. A primary is essentially something that you applied for in your name and you have 100% control of, right? That could be a credit card that you have under your name. That could be the auto loan that the dealership extended over to you. That could be the loan company that actually populated that mortgage loan for you, or it could be the original lender that actually gave you the student loan from going to college, right? The point is, it's something that you control and you directly own 100% of that contract, right? Your secondaries can include trade lines, authorized users, and or credit building accounts, right? So let's say, for example, I have a credit card and I decided to bring on Trevor on my credit card as an authorized user. Now, all the credit card history that I've built up over the last 6 years is now going to populate on Trevor's credit profile, right? Now, Trevor's going to be able to benefit off of the positive history that I've built up over the last 6 years, which for me is a primary. I own it, I control it. In his case, however, it is not a primary. It is more of a secondary account to him because I own the credit card and he has access to use that credit line, which is originally under my name, right? So when we're talking about primaries, having at least 5 of those gives just about most banks and lenders a general idea as far as how you plan on taking care of whatever credit they extend to you, or how well you've been able to construct a profile based off of what other banks have already given you up to this point, right? These secondary accounts can still be beneficial and they can still be used to help you grow credibility with your credit profile. However, at the end of the day, we want to build as much strength internally as we can. The main reason why is because nobody's going to be able to represent you better than you can represent yourself. And you can apply that to every aspect or every area of life. But at the end of the day, you are your best representation of yourself. And then finally, we come down to low utilization. So when we're talking about utilization, what I'm specifically emphasizing on is credit cards, right? So when you have anything above 30% utilization on your open credit cards, what the bank and lender is going to do is they're going to consider that to be higher utilization, right? They don't want to necessarily see that you've tapped so much into the available credit you already have under your name. And the main reason why is because we're only in front of them to ask for additional credit or to ask for additional resources, right? How much sense would it make, or how good would we be able to make them feel about the resources we're asking them for if they see we've already tapped out our own, right? Any personal credit cards that you have are always meant to be at least under 30% utilized relative to the total credit line that you actually have available to you. That's something that gives them a good feeling. That's something that makes them see or makes them feel like you don't necessarily need credit, which thus makes you a more attractive, lendable applicant to actually extend that credit to. If we can hit the next slide, that'd be great. So I wanted to bring on a few case studies for you guys so that I can really paint a visual picture of who exactly is getting approved for resources like this and how, right? So here we have Jesse. Jesse was able to obtain a total of $105,000 at 0% interest business funding through the first 2 applications in less than 2 weeks, right? Here we can see some of the approvals that we were able to get him, which on the left side, we have the Wells Fargo Signify Business Cash Card. This is a brand new product that Wells Fargo released 6 months ago, and it's essentially an entry-level business credit card that offers you 0% for 12 months. So what that means is any purchases or any balances that you carry for that first 12 months, you're not paying any monthly interest or APR on, right? That's something that you can use to buy yourself time, especially as a brand new business owner, right? We can see here that he was approved for a $30,000 available credit line. And on the right, we have the Business Inc. Unlimited from Chase, which is another one of those business entry level credit cards available to you from most public banks. Here we have a $75,000 line, which again is at 0% interest for at least a year, right? And then here we can also see some of what his credit profile entailed. Scores are well above the 700s. Total accounts, give or take, somewhere between 11 and 13 across the board. He has at least 5 primaries open on each credit profile: TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. And then we can see down at the very bottom, very minimal recent hard inquiries, virtually none on TransUnion, which is something that was very attractive to the banks that we applied for. Now, we were able to get him more funding than this. This was basically just the first round of funding that we constructed for him, given the timeline that this particular person had, right? So here we can kind of see how things become a little bit more realistic and a little bit more relatable as far as being able to gauge how exactly we can get ourselves put in that position and then how relatable we can make that become for us as well. If we could hit the next slide, that'd be great. Perfect. So here we have Amira. Amira was a bit of a different case, and I'm excited to really explain this one to you guys. But basically, she was able to obtain a total of $135,000 between personal and business funding in about a 4-week time span. Amira was looking for liquidatable funds, right? So a credit card gives you access to swipe as much as this credit limit. However, when we're talking about liquidatable resources like loans, those are deposited directly via ACH or wire into some type of checking account, whether it's your personal or business. From there, you can actually withdraw that from the bank, and now you have cash. That's something that's very, very famous amongst, for example, a lot of the real estate professionals that I work with. Main reason why is because you can't necessarily buy a property with, a credit card. It's not really something that you can swipe a card on. You need to be able to write a check, or you need to be able to have liquidatable funds, right? Something that you can use along the lines of cash. So that's what these loans provide. We have a business loan here for $50,000, which is actually in the form of an auto loan. And then we have, give or take, about $85,000 on the personal side across 2 different loans, right? One of them was from SoFi, and the second one down at the bottom was from Lightstream. Other personal loan providers that can lend to you for a variety of reasons, including debt consolidation, business loan opportunities, auto loans, personal loans, basically just about any reason you could need it for, they do service and they do provide. As a strategist, I like to paint a picture for my clients that we both know how much capital you need, and we also both know the timeline in which you're looking to accomplish acquiring this much capital. What's left in between those 2 things is how are we going to get it and who are we going to go to? Just because there's hundreds of thousands of lenders and capital providers all across the country. So basically, my job for a lot of people is being able to pinpoint what exactly is going to be the best resource for you, given what you're trying to do, and then how fast can I shorten the time gap of us needing that capital to us actually acquiring it. Here we can see with her profile, same thing. Scores will give or take well above the 700s. We have a good number of primaries. We have a low number of recent hard inquiries. Essentially, we also do have, if you notice here, 1 or 2 derogatories or collections, right? In my opinion, what I like to strive for is making sure that we are clear or free of as many derogatory items as possible. In this case in particular, however, this woman actually had something back from, I believe it was 2018 or 2019, right? It was just 1 or 2 for that year. We are in 2024, right? So when we're talking about being able to assess files that may or may not have certain derogatory items on it, the timeline of those items comes into play very directly, right? You would emphasize a lot more on a late payment if I had it this year as if I had it 5 years ago. It would just make so much more sense to emphasize and to give so much more importance on something that's recent versus being 5 or 6 years ago. And we can see in this case that was actually what happened, right? These lenders, they took a look at it. They saw that something had happened back during like the time that we were going into COVID. They didn't really give it too much importance because it wasn't recent and because they can see that all the history after that was not only positive, but it was also enough to be able to stand on its own 2 feet. And that's exactly what we've been able to see with many of our clients and much of who we have been able to service today. If we can hit the next slide, that'd be great. So this is actually one of my favorite case studies. Anthony was actually able to obtain a collective of $188,000 in 0% interest business funding through round one within a 3-week time span with this profile structure below, right? As we can see here, utilization is extremely low, give or take about 5%. His open accounts are about 6, and average age and oldest accounts are well above 10 years. This is another thing that a lot of people don't necessarily emphasize enough when it comes to being able to see what are my chances of being approved for new credit or for business funding credit opportunities. Your age plays a huge factor, right? And the reason why is because I can tell so much more about you just off of your age than I would be able to almost any other factor, right? A lot of that comes down to how long you've had your accounts. And one of the biggest things that affect that as well is new accounts that you've either applied for or new accounts that you've recently gotten approved for. Anytime you add new resources onto your profile, the average age across the entire build out, it becomes smaller and smaller, or I shouldn't say smaller, I should really say younger, just because you have older accounts and then you have new accounts being put together to bring about an average. That average is going to be very key when it comes to being able to determine what you can get approved for and who can actually give you the resources that you're looking for, right? This goes back to us being able to realize most of what we're going to get approved for or most of what we're applying for will entail our personal history being brought onto the table, especially when it comes to being the majority owner of a business, right? Now let's give a different scenario here. Let's say, for example, I have a business, but I have two business partners, right? And let's say I own, let's say I own 40% of the business and my two business partners own 30 and 30, right? So they own 60%, split evenly amongst them, and I own 40%. Let's say we decided to apply for a line of credit through PNC Bank, right? What's going to happen here is since we have three different owners, everybody's personal borrowing history may be brought onto the table, right? And let's say, for example, I don't have the best history, but one of my partners does. It makes sense for me to do whatever I can to lean onto that second or third partner as much as possible. And the reason for that are actually two. Number one, they have less time needed in order to make a decision formally on how much they're going to approve our company for and at what terms. And number two, the underwriting timeline dramatically gets decreased when they have one borrowing history to consider versus three, right? There's so many factors that come into being in a business with multiple partners and being able to access lending on a scale like that, regardless of whether you are a startup or whether you are an established business of 5, 10, 15, or even 30 years, right? And a lot of times, I believe in being able to create not only the best picture for yourself, but for your company as well. Your identity is protected by your social security number. Your business's identity is protected by the EIN number, right? That's basically your business's version of a social. That's their tax ID. A lot of times you're going to be in pictures or you're going to be in scenarios to where you have to bring them together, but at the same time, across the board, it makes sense, so much sense to take care of both of them individually, right? My closing thoughts and some of my closing myth busters that I want to give to you guys as well. You may have heard that you have to build business credit in order to access business funding. And I am here today to let you know that that is simply not true. I've been able to fund clients with LLCs or corporations as young as 3 days, 7 days, 30 days, no prior business credit built. And the main reason why is because of what those 2 points are that they look at, which is your personal borrowing history, thus your personal credit profile for whoever the majority owner of the business is, and the construction of the corporation itself. What industry is it in? Is that industry a high risk industry for the bank you're working with? Do they have sensitivity against the volatility of that industry, right? How much history have they been able to acquire based on what that industry does or is known for doing? And is that bank friendly towards it, right? There's banks, for example, like First Citizens Bank, that are super friendly towards the cannabis industry. And there's banks like PNC Bank, for example, that want nothing to do with the cannabis industry, right? Some people think it's impossible to get funding for certain things, but at the end of the day, what we need to know is, who are we working with? How solid of a chance do we have of having them actually hand us an approval? And number three, how friendly can we get them to be with not only our industry, but our timelines, right? Your need for capital in the next 2 weeks is going to be different from another business's owner's need for capital in the next 2 months or even 2 years, right? And it's simply because we are all working on different projects. We are all working under different timelines, and everybody has their own specific goals when it comes to being able to accomplish what you're looking for in your business. So I wanted to go ahead and kind of leave you guys with that. I'm sure we might have a few questions. So from here, I will pass it back to Trevor. Uh, here,
Awesome.
Trevor.
Yeah, dude, I just want to say thank you. That was very insightful.
Mhm.
I know we had a little bit of a conversation before we dove into this deep dive, but it really helps me and hopefully the listeners in the audience understand exactly like what is needed and, the steps we need to take in order to acquire the capital needed to build out our businesses. And we're talking specifically about Bitcoin mining businesses. We
Mhm.
all know that capital is very important to making that happen. So I just want
Yeah,
to say that we appreciate you and your time today.
of
Looks like
course.
we have some questions coming in. I'm going to just click on those real quick. Let's see here. So I'm going to show this one. Dennis asked, this all sounds too good to be true. Can you share your fees and how you are compensated for your help?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two major models that you'll find amongst most funding companies. And I like to make sure that my clients are given the options of doing whatever is best for them, right? So on one side, you may have an upfront consulting fee based on how much capital you're looking to raise. And that will normally result in somewhere along the lines of 2 to about 6% of that total amount of capital after it's been acquired, right? But that's in the form of an upfront consulting fee, right? So let's say, for numbers sake, for example, if you were looking to accomplish, applying for 100K, right? Normally, most companies have a performance-based fee or a success fee, if you will, right? That fee can range anywhere from 5 all the way up to about 25%. My company's performance-based fee is 10%, right? So let's say, for example, that same $100,000, if you were looking to acquire that, but you didn't want to pay any deposits, any upfront consulting fees, it would essentially just be a 10% success fee after you've acquired that capital, which can be either wired or invoiced. If you didn't want to do that and wanted to kind of give yourself a bit of a discount, then there would be some type of discounted upfront consulting fee, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So
Absolutely.
Peter asks, how much capital should someone start with?
This is a good question. So I'm going to give you the most generic answer that I can give you because I've worked with so many different business owners in so many different industries. I've noticed a lot that we like to plan a lot of stuff out as a business owner, right? I want to know what my upfront costs are going to be to open up this location. I want to know how much my inventory is going to cost for the next 3 months, or at least until I generate a profit. Or let's say, for example, I need enough capital to make sure that I'm just simply going to be in a good position, right? That number is going to be different for everybody, right? My best advice when it comes to trying to figure out how much capital you're looking to raise is look at what kind of a result you want to get, right? Once you take a good picture and you really hone in on what you want your results to be, it's going to make how much capital you're going to need in order to get there a lot easier. However, a general rule of thumb is if you needed, 25 or 50 or even $100,000, I would probably take somewhere between a 10 to 15% calculation in addition to how much capital you need. Just because we never know what kind of surprises we might get along the way, what kind of new events might come about that may or may not hold us back or may provide the need for additional capital. So if I originally needed $100,000, I would probably construct a plan for my client to be able to get somewhere along the lines of 110 or $115,000. Something that you can use to kind of give yourself a bit of a buffer, and also kind of some backup in case you actually did need to deploy that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm going to go
Yeah.
to Peter's other question because I think it ties in well. So Peter's asking, are you saying I can get a business loan and just smash it into Bitcoin for gains?
Technically, you could. Yeah. Something that I did back in the day is I actually had some experience in the Forex industry, the foreign exchange markets industry. I'm not sure if people are familiar with that. But I was able to take some financing and I was then able to flip that in the market using a bot trader, which I no longer have active, just to keep it clear. But essentially, this capital you can use for whatever you need it to, right? Now, the picture that you paint to the bank is one thing. I do want to make sure that that's clear. We do still want to construct something that they're going to approve, which is essentially something that's going to be compliant, something that they're going to have already worked with in the past, and something that gives them ease of mind, right? And knowing, hey, even though I'm borrowing this capital, regardless of how much it's going to be, I do plan on paying this back within the terms outlined when I originally got the approval, right? That's something that's extremely important. And when it comes to deploying that capital, regardless of whether you deploy a portion of it or whether you deploy the entire amount, you should still always have a plan and still always have some type of structure as far as being able to tell, hey, this is what I plan on doing with this, or this is what I would like my timeline to look like. I stress that very, very intensely with a lot of my clients because I have had clients that have dumped some of these loans and profits into, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin. Honestly, not everybody is successful, right? But we all know that. But the point is to make sure that we know what our plan is and how we actually plan on accomplishing that, if you will. But yes,
Yeah,
it is possible to answer your question.
that makes a lot of sense. I feel like people need to be very careful with their strategy and
Mhm,
make sure that it falls in line with their plan. So thank you for that.
mhm.
The next question we have here is from Jack. So what about non-credit card financing, raising equity or non-traditional non-credit card debt?
Yeah, so that's definitely something that's possible. Earlier in my slideshow, there was a slide that kind of outlined some of the programs that we had outside of credit card stacking. The reason why I emphasize it so much is because that's probably one of the easier resources to acquire if you're a new or established business. But if you're looking for a lump sum, there's definitely, you have the SBA, you have MCAs. We do have some private lenders and even private equity lenders that are always looking to fund brand new businesses. Once we get on a conversation, what I can do is I can just kind of dive a little bit deeper as far as what you're looking to do. And then if it makes sense for them, we get put in contact. And then from there, I'll basically help you come up with a business plan or the best way to explain what you're looking to do so that way they have the best possible chance of approving you or actually lending to you. Not all lenders are banks or institutions. A lot of them are people just like you and me. If you have a spare lump sum of money and you're looking to get a return on that, those are the people that we go to see if they can fund, the newest real estate development or a startup in an industry that is not as famous as we would like it to be. Right. So those are definitely options that are on the table. The process for them is a little bit different, as you might be able to tell, but the availability for it is there. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kevin. So our
Yeah.
next question comes from Cade Peterson. So for some of my big projects, it takes a few months to get things rolling. How are lenders with that delay? Do they care about revenue inflow? Also, are
Mhm.
any lenders taking BTC as payment?
Great question. Well, great questions. Right. So a lot of times when it comes to accessing funding, whatever game plan we have, and when I say game plan, the timeline that we have is extremely important, right? There are lenders that will take delayed payments or deferred payments Not all of them will, though, right? It is a more rare case because most lenders are going to want to see, at the very minimum, some type of minimum monthly payment as soon as that clock starts. And that could generally be 30 days after you get approved for something, regardless of what balances you're actually carrying, right? On the back end, there are a few lenders that I do know that take BTC as a payment. However, across the board, they do prefer it to be some type of either liquid or some type of cash transaction, right? Something that can be checked along the lines of either a credit card or even a personal checking account, right? Using a debit or an ACH or wire payment. It's not too often that I run into a lender that will take BTC as a payment. But if we're dealing with something along the lines of a private money lender or even a hard money lender, you'll have a higher chance of them being able to take that as a foreign payment.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So the next question comes from Peter again. So beyond getting the capital, what would be the biggest hurdle for most miners just starting out? Where should money go first?
That's a good question, man. I'll be honest with you. I'm not too provident in the world of Bitcoin mining enough to answer that specific question. My expertise is more so on being able to raise capital and making sure that business owners deploy it into the right places. But the best answer that I can give is making sure you understand the process of Bitcoin mining, making sure that you understand everything that can go right and everything that can go wrong, so that in the back of your head, you start to make preparations and you start to create what I like to call bullet points across the board and being able to make sure, hey, if I run into this specific scenario, regardless of whether it's good or bad, here's how I'm going to pivot, right? Being a business owner is all about knowing how to pivot and how best to make decisions that you have to make under pressure and under stress. I can apply that to Bitcoin mining. I can apply that to foreign exchange markets. I can apply that to selling insurance, which I used to do. And even in today's world where my expertise is based upon credit and funding, I apply that there as well, right? Just making sure that you can just kind of build skin that's thick enough to be able to pivot if you needed to would honestly be my best answer towards that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great answer.
Mhm,
So this next question is more of a statement, less of a question. But Joe
mhm,
over on Twitter was talking about the importance of explaining the nature of the business so that lenders feel comfortable. So, for
mhm,
example, explaining a Bitcoin mine as a data center or a storage unit for hardware. This is something that comes up a lot in Bitcoin mining. We talk about,
mhm,
when you're trying to build this relationship with big banks, a lot of the big banks don't feel as comfortable around crypto as you
mhm.
feel. So
Yeah,
explaining the business in a different way and kind of the touch points on it are different in with different verbiage, I guess I
mhm,
is what I'm trying to
yeah,
say.
yeah, absolutely, 1000%. So when it comes to being able to explain the nature of your business, you for sure are going to want to stay within a specific set of guidelines that have already been proven to work, right? There's so many things that we can say, even if we were decided to pinpoint exactly what we did or in what industry we're in. For me, for example, the banks feel, I would say, the same about Bitcoin as they do about funding, right? It's hard for me to explain to a banker that I know their guidelines better than they do, right? Because they're the ones that have been working for that bank for 2, 3 years, right? So what do? My business is labeled as a consulting industry. That's basically what I do for most of my clients, right? And consulting can be specific towards an industry, but it could also be very generic. And it could be something that relates to multiple industries across the board. So when I sit down with the banker, what I explain to them is essentially, hey, I'm a business consultant. I basically help small businesses get off the ground by acquiring resources, acquiring capital, acquiring resources, right? That they need in order to grow or that they need in order to buy back some of their time. My way of explaining that to the bank is somewhat generic, but it's also something that does technically fall under the guidelines of what I actually do, right? So for a Bitcoin mining company to be able to label that as like a data storage center or to label that as like a tech startup or something like that, it would technically fit into the guidelines of what you're actually trying to access. So yes, that's definitely something that I work on with my clients one on one. The verbiage that you give to the bank is extremely, extremely important. Not only that, but if we have, a certain list of products that we're looking to get approved for, and let's say those products fall under, Chase Bank and Bank of America, I don't send you into a branch to get that done. I have bankers on my team that work for Chase or that work for Bank of America, and they've been working with my clients already. So they already have their setup that they know. And then my job on the front end is being able to prepare you as much as possible for that conversation, which includes what to say, what not to say, details that you do want to include, and then details that you do not want to include in order to make sure that you actually get the approval that you're looking for.
No, that's a perfect way to describe that. I've heard that a lot. All right, so the next question comes from Dennis again. So what banks, to your experience, are most loyal to crypto?
So there's a few fintech startup banks, to be honest with you, that are more loyal to crypto. One of them can be Marcus by Goldman Sachs, right? Another one I've actually known to be SoFi, right? So these people are essentially, they know that most banks and most lenders don't like to fund certain industries the same way somebody would, for example, the cannabis industry, right? First Citizens loves the cannabis industry, PNC does not, right? So far, those are two that I have been able to see and work with that do like to work with the crypto industry. The guidelines for how they decide to work with you can always be specific depending on what exactly you're doing and what picture you paint for them, right? The cryptocurrency industry is honestly very wide with a number of coins that we can't access here in the States that you could access in other countries, right? Depending on what your carrier is, right? So when you consider that, they're going to want to know what exactly are you working with? What coins are you working with? Are they US based? Are they available across the world? Things like that are some questions that could pop up in that conversation with those lenders. So that's definitely something that I can have some guidance on.
For sure.
Mhm.
So one of the last questions that we have, and we have time for more questions, guys. If you have a question, please post it in the chat, and I'll make sure it
Mhm.
happens. But so Dan asks, in the scenarios you ran with the Wells Fargo and Chase credit cards, or any like it, is there a benefit or advantage to submitting these all at the same time or opening up over a few weeks or months?
That's a good question. So on your credit profile, you have three different data resources, right? You're going to have Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. For the most part, these three resources should have the same data, and the data they have should agree with each other down to the T, meaning the same account opening date, the same ending balances, the same exact account numbers, right? That same credit card that you have or that same mortgage that you have is supposed to look the same on all three profiles. Oftentimes it does not. But the reason why I bring that up is because each bank is going to pull from one of those data resources. Chase Bank, for example, they're known to pull from Experian, and in certain regions in the country, they'll pull from TransUnion, right? American Express, they're known to pull from TransUnion, and depending on where you're at geographically in the country, they may also pull from Experian. Truist Bank, for example, they always pull from Equifax, right? So on the back end, with the data that we've been able to collect and the clients that we've been able to service, we've built up, give or take, a Rolodex of data, including what bank or what bureau a bank is going to pull from, what data resources they're looking for. And a lot of times that matches up, give or take, depending on where in the country you're at, right? So the benefit to that would be if you have two different banks and you know for sure that they pull from two different data resources, then it wouldn't be a bad idea to apply at the same time. Either way, they're not going to see it because one of them is pulling from Experian and the other one is going to pull from TransUnion. Those are two completely separate profiles. Now, let's say if you had the same two banks, but they pulled from the same data resource, the first one that you deploy, they're not going to see any previous application history. The second one you apply for, however, they'll be able to tell today's November 8th and on November 6th, you applied for a different bank that pulled from the same bureau. That may or may not be a reason for them to give you less capital because it's too soon for them to be able to tell if you've gotten approved. All they can see is you've already applied with somebody else. We don't know if it was successful or not because it was literally just 2 days ago, right? So that's something that you want to be able to consider and keep in mind when you're applying for multiple resources at the same time. When it comes to national banks, regional banks, and local credit unions, it's relatively pretty predictable. When it comes to the government, private money, MCAs, basically any third-party resources that you're looking to access lending from, that's where it kind of gets like more unpredictable. We don't know who you're going to pull from because we don't have enough data to supply that.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So this next question comes from Ivan. So Ivan asks, what's the difference between seed funding, Series A and B, comparing to credit loans?
Yeah, got you. So depending on how you classify your corporation as, and depending on what stage you're in, different forms of raising capital are going to be applicable to you, right? So seed funding for me is definitely anything along the lines of startup funding. Just think about the connotation of planting a seed into the dirt and waiting for it to grow into a plant, a flower, or a tree, right? You want to be able to make sure that you have your bases covered, and the types of capital acquisition that you can have for seed funding are always going to be different from a Series A, a Series B, or whatever other capital acquisition you could actually come to the table for on your business, right? If you have a company that's going public, for example, and we start getting into the topic of IPOs, so on and so forth, your Series A and your Series B are basically going to be different rounds of being able to support whatever public acquisitions you're looking to do. That would be more so something that's applicable for a company that is either going public or something that has different forms of equity, kind of like Spiderweb with different owners. That's where you get into having like your chair board of members and stuff like that, right? Most people, I do recommend that you keep the structure of your company as simple as possible, as long as possible, right? You want to be able to make sure that you've had enough simplicity to grow consistently until you do get to a point to where now you have to expand. Maybe you have to change the structure of your corporation. And I do have a few advisors on my team that are super, super well experienced in that as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So guys, I've got one more question from Peter, and this is not really pertinent to the conversation, but is Bitcoin going to hit 100K by the end of 2024? Kevin, what do you think?
I think that we have a good shot at it, to be honest with you, man. As we all know, we just recently hit an all-time high, right? So that's
Yes.
some very good news. And I think I have to say it too, man. Politics does have a lot to do with it.
Yeah,
Absolutely does,
absolutely.
right?
We're seeing a big, huge shift in the political winds. I feel like a lot of people are feeling it as much as I'm feeling it. We're feeling very positive,
Oh yeah.
and I think that's going to tie into the Bitcoin price. I don't know if I want to call 100K by the end of the year, but we've been seeing new all-time highs almost every single day since Trump was elected. So we might bounce up to 90. We might even hit 100K. I'm not going to call it, but I'm definitely bullish.
I hope we do.
I hope
I'll give
so
it that.
too.
I hope we
I
do.
hope so too. All right. Well, hey, Kevin, I appreciate your time today. Everybody here at Bitcoin Mining World and the Mastermind appreciates you for jumping on and explaining this to us. Where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you and kind of get more information about getting funding for their business and their mining operation?
Yeah, for sure. So the best way to get to speak to me directly is if you go to fundmesoon.com. That'll basically take you to my personal calendar. Feel free to book a 30 or 45-minute call with me. Be more than happy to give you details. I am also on Instagram at Organic Papito, right? I am also on Facebook. First name is Kevin, Kevin. Last name is Araujo, Araujo. Feel free to send me a message there as well. Or you can also go to fund.formidablecapital.io. That's my company website. We'll be able to kind of explain, the bulk of the resources that we have. At the end of the day, man, I'm looking forward to speaking to everybody. I'm sure the community would appreciate if I were to hop back on maybe next month, or even if we decided to make this a regular thing. Definitely would love to.
For sure. Well, we appreciate your time today, man, and we'll talk about it after the chat. So, everybody,
absolutely.
this was our November 8th. Today's the 8th Mastermind deep dive. We will have a deep dive on the 15th. So next weekend or next Friday, we have another one happening just because the holidays are coming up after that. So we're just going to do them back to back this time. But I appreciate everybody for jumping in on the call and watching it. We will see you guys next time. Thank you again, Kevin.
Always, Trevor. It's a pleasure to meet everybody.
Thank you for joining us in the Mastermind Club, your ultimate gateway into the world of Bitcoin mining. Whether you're just starting out or looking to scale your operations, our vibrant community of like-minded enthusiasts is here to support you every step of the way. Join us next week where you'll exchange ideas, brainstorm strategies, and stay motivated on your mining journey. Thank you for joining us and tune in next week.